everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today for this training session. It looks like pretty much everyone's signed in, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I wanted to quickly introduce you to myself. For all you newbies that are joining us today, my name is Virginia Garamoni, and I work for the Arts and Science Council in Charlotte, North Carolina. And Arts and Science Council hosts the Power to Give website, and I work to help support all of you, our wonderful curators on Power to Give. Teresa Hubbard is also on the webinar today. Say hi, Teresa. She's probably still
Hi, everybody. I'm here.
Hey, and so Teresa works for Fractured Atlas in New York City, and Fractured Atlas is our amazing technology partner that has built this wonderful new website we have that we launched in October of last year. And Teresa works directly with the developers at Fractured Atlas and helps facilitate any fixes or requested enhancements on the new site. So we'll both be here available throughout the training session to answer any questions you have along the way. So let's go ahead and get started. Just a little housekeeping. You guys probably already know this, but we are going to be in broadcast only mode today. So if you want to ask any questions at any point during the training, you can go ahead and use the text box here. You can also send me emails afterwards with any questions you might have forgotten during the training at virginia.garamoni@artsandscience.org. The webinar is being recorded, and a copy of this recording and slides are going to be sent out to you guys early tomorrow. We've got a lot to go through, and our agenda today is the first thing we're going to do is take a tour of the Curator Dashboard. We're going to look at how to review and approve a campaign. Throughout the whole training, we're going to be looking at how you run reports in different ways on the system. We're going to talk about processing payments and understanding the fees on Power to Give. Then I'm going to hand it over to Teresa, who's going to talk about some of the recent and future Power to Give enhancements we've had, and also talk about the timeline for the transition 2016. And then at the very end, if we've got time, we're going to have just an open session with Q&As, so we can just kind of talk about things that were covered in the training, or if you had any additional questions, we can go through those as well. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing when you're signed on to power2give.org is you see our home screen. And the first thing you guys want to do is log in, which is right there on the top right-hand corner, which will bring you to the login screen. And if for whatever reason you've forgotten your password, there's a great link there that you can just click and get a password reset reminder sent to your email. Once you've signed in, you're going to be able to see your name populating in the top right-hand corner, which means you've successfully logged in, and you'll have this nifty drop-down menu available to you as a curator. And looking at this drop-down, the first thing we're going to take a look at is your Curator page. And so when you look at the Curator page, it's going to have, this is basically the landing site for anyone that's navigating straight to your Power to Give site. So for instance, this is Power to Give/Charlotte. And it'll have, your logo, have a title. There'll be a little blurb for your About Us. Right now you'll see that it's selected to campaigns, but if you clicked on the other side where FAQs is, you'll be able to get a little bit more information about Power to Give. And if you scroll down a little bit more, you're going to see your featured campaigns, which will usually default to the top 3 active projects on your system. There'll also be a place for people to search for specific campaigns in your location, and there'll be a public contact information. So if anyone wanted to contact someone about Power to Give in your location, that's the email they would use. And in this case, you can see it's charlotte@power2give.org. So let's take a look at the Curator Dashboard, which is where you're going to be spending most of your time as a curator. Again, you'll be going up to that top right-hand corner to your drop-down, and you're going to select Dashboard. And the first tab you're going to see is Basics, and this is actually going to be the place where you can update any of the information on your curated page. So you'll see that there's a place to enter the title, which is usually the name of your organization, a subtitle if your organization does use one. This will be where you can edit and change or add information about the About Us text that comes up, and also where you can edit that public contact information. If you scroll down further on this page, you're going to see the cover photo, which is that banner you saw on the curated page. And just to kind of give you guys a heads up, this image does appear slightly darker when it's live on the Curator page. This is a design feature where we darken the image so that your logo and the title of your organization shows up a little bit better. There's also a place to type in a link, so if someone clicks on your logo, they'll be able to be navigated usually to your main website. So if they want to learn more about the Arts and Science Council, on their curated page, you click that logo and they would go directly to your website. And if you scroll down a little bit further, this is where you would enter your FAQs. I think most of you guys have already entered in FAQs on your curated page, but if you haven't, I highly recommend you do so. In particular, I think this is helpful for people that are interested in posting a project on your campaign. This is a place where if you have any restrictions, you can talk those through on the site. For instance, on our page, we talk a lot about project curation, you know, who can post a project and the different ins and outs of having a project. So again, this is a great place for you to put that there where it's accessible to the public at any time. And then the last thing on this basic tab is just your accent color. So it's a nice little branding feature for your site. So, you know, if your organization brands its colors mostly in reds, it's a place where you can select red as the banner colors for your curated page. So the next tab is your matching sponsors. And when you see this tab on your dashboard, you're going to have a list of all currently active and previous matching sponsors on your site. It's going to have a little breakdown of all the information for each matching sponsor, and we'll go into detail about these items in a little while. And if you want to go ahead and add a sponsor, you would click on that green button there, and this will take you to the new sponsor page where you'll have a chance to name your sponsor. So for instance, if Bank of America is receiving or sending out matching funds, this is where you would put Bank of America Match 2016. And then you'd be able to select a logo for Bank of America here. And then this is where you would actually add in the Bank of America website. So if someone is looking at the sponsors for your projects and they want to learn more about that sponsor, they can click on the logo and be directed to that website. If you scroll down a little bit further on this page, this is where you can change your settings for your matching sponsors. Now what you're looking at right now is the default setting for matching funds. And we'll just kind of go through them really quickly one by one. So this is the first one that is pretty much always going to be selected. This is sponsor provides matching funds. There shouldn't be really any reason why you'd be adding a new sponsor that wouldn't be providing matching funds for your campaigns. The next one is kind of a dream, but probably not something you guys are going to see very often. But this is something where you would select if your sponsor has unlimited matching funds. So if they were willing to donate, you know, and match donations up to any amount, then this is the place where you would select that. And this next one is actually really important. We'll talk a little bit more about this when we start talking about donor benefits. But basically, on the new site, we have the ability for curators to allow fundraisers to have benefits with a market value, which will impact the tax deductibility of donations. And so what this does is basically limits the matching funds to only match the tax deductible portion of an individual's gift. Some sites are choosing to allow the full amount of the donation, regardless of tax deductibility, to be matched, but that's just something to think about. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. The next one also is really important. This is end matches once the campaign has met its goal. As you might know, site projects on the new site allow people to donate to the project until the end date is reached. Previously, the campaign would end once the goal was reached, but now it's when the end date is reached. So for example, if there is a campaign that's running for 3 months and they're trying to raise $5,000 for a project, and within the first month they have already raised $5,000, so they've reached their goal, they're still able to fundraise for the next 2 months for this project. And so what this means for your matching funds is to think about, well, once they reach their funding goal of $5,000, do you want to no longer allow those extra donations to be matched? Or are you happy for them to donate, until the project reaches its end date. The only reason we would make you kind of think a little bit about this is if, for instance, you had a very generous board member for one of your local organizations, and their campaign is for $5,000, but he noticed that there's a $1,000 or a $100,000 matching fund for Bank of America. That donor could, in essence, donate $10,000 and scoop up, $20,000 worth of matching funds. So this is one of the reasons why we kind of encourage you to select end matches once the campaign has been met. It kind of just protects your matching funds. Again, this is all personal preference. That's kind of just a little bit of advice. If you look here at matching restrictions, this is just a place for you to have a note internally about any kind of restrictions that may be available on this match. For instance, maybe it's a science company that's only matching science-related projects. And then this here is just where you'll be able to put in the ratio for your match. So when you click into this box, you can either type or select if, for a $1 donation, if it's going to get a 50-cent match, a dollar for dollar match, $2 match, etc. And then at that point, what you're going to want to do is actually save your sponsor. And once you've saved your sponsor, you can then add funds. And you'll be doing that by just clicking on the Add Fund button here, which will give you a pop-up box where you can type in the amount that the sponsor is providing for matching funds. This is also the place where you could remove funds if you needed to for some reason. And then at this point, you can actually add campaigns to the sponsor. So where you see the star there, you can type into that box. And you've got a couple options. You can actually type into the box the name of the campaign, or there'll be a drop-down menu where you can actually select what campaigns that are currently on at your location. And anything that's highlighted in gray has already been added to this sponsor. And then, of course, you always want to save. The next tab in the dashboard is going to be your donations, which is pretty straightforward. By default, you're going to see just a running total of all donations made on your site. And if you want to, you can actually put in a start and end date if you want to filter by a certain time. And the nice thing is here, there's also, these are blue links to the campaigns. So if for some reason you were curious about a certain donation, you can click directly into here and actually open up the campaign. The other nice thing is if you scroll all the way down at the donation page, you'll be able to download the donation report, which will either export an Excel spreadsheet for the entire donation history of your site if you leave that start and end date blank, or if you wanted to, again, just have a report for a certain time period, this is where you would do that. The next tab is going to be refunds. And it's pretty straightforward. If you've got any refunds, this is where they're going to display. Just as a reminder for refunds, some of you are new, so I just wanted to touch on this briefly. If for some reason one of your donors did need a refund, what you need to do first is to process the refund to the donor's credit card, which is actually handled by Authorize.net. Not all curators have access to Authorize.net, so this might be something that your financial officers in the office may have to take care of for you. But once you've confirmed that the refund has been given to the donor via their credit card, you then would email me with all the information, and I would be able to process a refund through the website, which would then display on this page here. The next tab is pending check donations. And again, this is pretty straightforward. If you've enabled checks on your system, basically what happens is when a donor makes a donation by check, the donation is not immediately posted to the project. What happens is it is recorded as a pending check donation, which you'll see here. And then once you've actually received the check in your office and it's cleared, you would then come in here and mark the donation as paid. And at this point, the donation will actually be recorded on the campaign page and on the reports. So this is good, so if a check never comes in or gets lost, the fundraiser won't be disappointed that their check is actually less than they think at the end of the campaign because certain check payments didn't go through. So luckily they won't see it until the checks have cleared. The next tab is your fundraiser tab. Pretty straightforward. This is going to be a list of all the fundraisers that are either building or have already built and submitted campaigns in your location. And it will have a snapshot of all of their contact details. If you look at the bottom of this page, there is a report that will pull all the details you see right here, as well as full address details, which is really helpful when you're cutting those checks and trying to remember where you're going to be sending them to. The next one is the final tab on the dashboard is your payment processing. And you'll never have to worry about this, but this is where you'll see the authorized.net login ID and transaction key. All of these things were merged over from the old site, and there shouldn't be any reason that they would change unless for some reason you were updating your authorized.net account. And then also this is the place where you would put in your terms of service. Again, this is terms of service should have already been copied over from the old site during the transition, and there were just minor amendments made to reflect the changes to fees on the new site. But if you could all just do me a favor and just check your dashboard to make sure terms of service is added in this field. If it's not, just shoot me an email and I'll make sure that your terms of service has been transitioned from the old site to the new. We want to just make sure that the terms of service is available for donors if they have any questions about how their donations are being used. And the final thing on the payment page is your checks. So these are your check fields here. If these fields are blank, that means that checks are deactivated on your site. And if you wanted to activate checks, you would just enter in the information in these fields and checks would be available as a payment option for your donors. So that basically gets us through the dashboard. So now we're going to take a look at campaigns and look at how to review and approve them. I'm just going to take a minute here and make sure that there aren't any questions. Looks like we're all set there. So let's just get right back into it. So the first thing when you're going to review a campaign is that when a campaign has been submitted for approval by the curator, which basically means that they're asking for you to approve it so it can go live and they can start fundraising, the first thing you're going to see is an email in your inbox, which will look similar to this. Now, if you're already logged into power2give, you can go ahead and click the link inside the email and go directly to the campaign page to begin the review process. And just keep in mind that if you're not already logged into the system, you will receive an error if you try to follow this link. So when you're looking for your campaigns and looking to review, if you're not going to follow the link directly, you would go into your drop-down button and click on My Campaigns. And this will take you to your campaign page as a curator. So the default is going to be your pending approval. So this is going to be a list of all campaigns that are still waiting for you to review them and launch them, ready to be live to be fundraised. The draft tab is going to give you all campaigns that are currently being built by fundraisers, but they have yet to submit them for your approval. So they're probably in draft mode, or it could be that they've started to build a project but decided not to go forward with it. But sometimes it's nice to reach out to the organizations if you notice that there's a few projects that have been lingering in drafts, just to see what their status is and if they are planning on submitting it at some point. Launching Soon tab is going to be all campaigns that have already been approved by you but are not launching until a time in the future. So these are just kind of pending, waiting for their start date. Hibernating campaigns, we'll talk a little bit more about hibernating, but basically these are campaigns that were launched but have chosen to be removed from the public site and are not currently receiving donations. And we'll talk a little bit more about why you would hibernate a project and how that works a little later. And then finally, the tab for On My Page. These are going to be all the projects that are currently live on your site and are able to receive donations. But since we're talking about approving and reviewing campaigns, when you're ready to start reviewing a submitted campaign, you would be going to the pending tab, which you see here, and then you would just click on the tile to preview the campaign. And so once you click there, you're going to actually see a preview of what the donor would see when the campaign goes live. So I like this feature because it gives me a chance to look at how the images are displaying, take a look at the video, quickly read through the narrative, and kind of get a snapshot of what their benefits look like. Usually any kind of big issues I can see right in this view. But just to kind of make sure that we're being really thorough, I do expect that all the curators are going to be kind of going through the projects kind of piece by piece. And so to do that, at the end of the campaign on the green bar, you're going to see the edit button. And this will give you a list of all the different parts of the campaign. So the first thing we're going to look at is the basics. So when you open up basics, the first thing you're going to notice is that organization always is choose, but don't worry about that. It's just a quirk of the system because you're not actually part of every organization that posts on your system. So as long as you notice the organization's name was in the tile image that you saw earlier, you can expect that everything was set up as it should be. The next thing to look at is just to make sure that this organization is in your region and is posting in your region and is eligible. Then you'll look at the campaign title, which is pretty straightforward, as well as the tagline, just to make sure that they're kind of clearly illustrating what they're doing or at least enticing their donors. And the preferred posting date is going to be reviewed by you, but it is the date that the fundraiser has asked to have the project go live. So this is a good flag for you to kind of decide or kind of get a sense of when they are hoping their project is going to be live and ready to make donations. The preferred end date, again, is the date that the campaign will cease receiving donations and the campaign will close. Very rarely, I think, will you see, will you want the date to be blank. On the new system, there is the option for organizations to post projects with an open-ended campaign, which are usually meant to be general funding accounts for the system. So it would be like a general pot of money for an organization rather than a project-based donation, which of course they would need an end date to, you know, kind of cease funding and then start actually creating the project. In most cases, curators recommend that campaigns go no longer than 90 days from the start date, but again, that's an individual choice. The other thing to look at is funding goal. And again, most curators are not accepting budgets over $10,000 currently. We locally say that if there are campaigns that have larger budgets, that we would break them up into phases. So if there is a group that's fundraising for maybe a new opera, we would encourage them to maybe post a project for costumes and then post another project for hiring the orchestra, etc. So they can still raise the money they need, but it's in more digestible chunks of money. Because usually within 30 days, it's a bit difficult to raise more than $10,000 for a lot of our organizations. And then categories is the last piece, which is pretty self-explanatory. You just want to make sure that the categories are in sync with the campaign and the project that they're trying to fundraise for. And again, if you do make any changes, be sure to save and continue. The next thing we're going to look at is the campaign images, which is pretty straightforward. The first thing they can do is upload a cover photo, which is the banner image they're going to see on their campaign page. This is a mobile sensitive image, so just keep that in mind that the image will reformat slightly depending on the size of the screen that's being viewed. So for instance, on a phone, it may look different than on a tablet or on a desktop computer. So in that respect, there's actually no recommended sizes, but we found that, you know, choosing an image with the highest resolution they can, as well as a widescreen image, always displays better. We also recommend not to have images with text because you're never quite sure how the image will crop. And then they also have an image for their tile image, which is that smaller campaign image we saw earlier, which will be displayed when the campaign is shown in a list. Usually, for instance, on a curated homepage, there'll be the tile images available for all the campaigns that are currently running. The next thing we're going to look at is embedding a video. And the only thing that you really need to know is that videos are totally optional, but that we highly recommend them because we find that organizations that have a video on their project seem to raise money faster and much easier. And we have two video options, which are YouTube and Vimeo. So if they're having trouble with their videos and they don't seem to be linking properly, you want to make sure that they are trying to upload either a YouTube or Vimeo file. And the next thing to look at is the project narrative, which is pretty straightforward. The biggest things are to make sure that there's no grammatical errors when you're going through the narrative, that the text is clear and engaging, and that the ask isn't buried, that they are clearly saying that we're raising money and we need your help. We also highly recommend having a simple budget to give transparency to the project, and also to include the administrative fees. We do have the option for donors to cover the administrative fees for their donations, but we would much rather have a organization raise more money than they need than to raise money and then realize they don't have enough to complete their project. And the final thing when you're reviewing a campaign is to look at your donor benefits. So donor benefits are really important, especially with market value issues, which we'll talk about now. But the biggest thing to know is that as a curator, once you have launched a project, you can no longer change or edit any of the benefits on the campaign. This has to do with making sure our data stays intact and that there's no bugs that happen in the system from trying to delete or change amounts on the benefits. So just make sure that you're spending a lot of time and being really thorough when you're reviewing benefits. So when you do that, when you click benefits, there's going to be that little blue edit button in the corner there, and you'll click on there to look at each benefit. And so you'll see the name, and the name's really important because this is the text that comes up in the donor reports for your fundraiser, and this is usually what they're going to use to see which of their donors have asked for what benefit. So we usually recommend that the fundraisers choose something fairly descriptive. Description is pretty straightforward. It's just talking about what is your benefit. The minimum donation is going to be the amount that the donor has to give before receiving the benefit. And just to keep in mind that because we want to make sure that every donor has some portion of their gift to be tax deductible, your fundraiser can no longer set a market value that is higher or the same amount as the minimum donation. They'll receive an error if they do try to do that. Market value is a cost to the organization to provide the benefit, and we'll talk a little bit more about market value in a second here. Number available, again, is if it's a tangible object, how many of these objects do they have, or if it's, say, a VIP tour of an exhibition that they're giving away as a benefit, how many people can they comfortably accommodate for that event? And then you'll also want to make sure that they're selecting if they require shipping or not. And again, this is pretty simple. You just need to know, does the benefit include something physical that needs to be received by the donor by mail? So let's just talk a little bit more about market value because this seems to be an issue that's been causing a bit of confusion on the new system. So a market value of a benefit can impact the tax deductibility of the donor's gift. So if a benefit has no market value, for instance, maybe it's a thank you on their Facebook page for every donor that donates. In that case, it's not a tangible item, so it doesn't have a market value, which means that 100% of the donation the donor makes as tax deductible. But if there is a cost to the benefit, this amount is deducted automatically for the donor on their tax receipt. And tax deductibility of benefits is visible to donors on the campaign page, and it's also clearly stated on their receipts. And the other thing about market value is that it can impact the matching amount applied to donations. So basically what we were looking at earlier on the matching page is that by default, the match is only going to cover the tax deductible portion of a donation. A lot of curators have kind of thought to themselves that, you know, because they're wanting most of their matches and donations to be tax deductible, and that's kind of the appeal for donors, that in a similar way their sponsors feel that their matching dollar should go towards just the tax deductible portion of the gift. For instance, they don't want to be matching the cost of a t-shirt or maybe tickets to an opera. But again, this is completely optional, and as a local curator you can choose to match the full amount of the gift. Just you want to check the matching fund settings in your Curator Dashboard to make sure that's either checked or unchecked the way you want it to be. So let's just look at a quick example. So let's say that a donor is donating $100 and selects a benefit that includes 2 tickets with a market value of $20. So their receipt will show the tax deductible portion of their gift is $80 because they donated $100, they received tickets that were worth $20, and so the tax deductible portion of their gift is $80. Now, if this campaign has a one-to-one match and is only matching the tax deductible portion of the gift, then that means that the running total on the campaign page would show the full $100 donated by the donor, and they would also show an $80 match because, again, this matching sponsor has chosen only to match the tax deductible portion of the gift, which is only $80, so the match would show up as 80. It's just really important for you to be sure that you're explaining this to your fundraisers when they're creating benefits, and usually just to mention it before launching their project. We just don't want any confusion for the fundraisers when they start seeing that their one-to-one matches aren't quite what they thought they were. So the last piece of reviewing a campaign is the messages function. So this is going to be just next to the edit button that we've been looking at earlier. And this is going to be a place where you can communicate with your fundraiser, and your fundraiser can communicate with you within the campaign itself. So basically you can get, you can just click that blue button and add a message and say, maybe campaign looks great, but I've got a question about one of the values of your benefit. I want to discuss more. Or maybe they don't have a itemized budget and you want them to include one. This is a place where you could just send that information to them. And the nice thing is once the message is posted on this back end here, they'll also receive an email notification. And similarly, if a fundraiser sends a message using this, you'll receive an email to your account as well. So at that point, if you're really happy with the campaign, you think everything looks good and all the requirements that you've set internally are checked, you would go ahead and click the Approve button, which is this little checkbox or a check mark with the Approve. And when you type in that, you're going to see a calendar pop up. And usually the date that's highlighted is the day you're looking at it, and the blue is usually the date that the fundraiser has selected as the start date. And you can adjust that here as you see fit. You can usually select that a campaign go live within the next half hour as a curator. And again, you just want to select the day, select the time, make sure you're checking either AM or PM. And one of the things that some people forget about, because we are a national coast-to-coast system, that the launch times are in Eastern. So for example, I know we've got a curator in Seattle. That's a good 3 hours behind us, just to make sure that when they're posting their launch time that they're thoughtful about the Eastern time zone. And that's it, and you hit Approve and it'll be ready to go. One thing to think about is that we've found that the system may not let you select a date earlier than the one selected by the fundraiser. We may have fixed this already, but if you have noticed any problems with this, please send me an email, And then also if for some reason the half hour in the future is just not quick enough to get a project launched, you can either email me or give me a call so I can go ahead and manually launch that project right away. And that's how you approve and review campaigns. So let's look a little bit at how you manage launch campaigns. So when a campaign is launched, a few of the things you can do is hibernate, remove, or close a campaign. So the hibernate option is something we were talking about a little earlier, but basically by hibernating a campaign, either you as a curator or the fundraiser can do this themselves, and they would just click this little gear option and then select hibernate. And what this is going to do is it's going to actually remove the campaign from public view. Usually people choose to hibernate, say if there's an illness and the person who's managing the campaign cannot deal with the emails or anything like that, or if for some reason they decided to postpone the project and they don't want to start fundraising, they can go ahead and hibernate the campaign and then they can relaunch it at a date that's more suitable. The nice thing is that it doesn't remove any information, and the campaign's always there whenever they do decide to go live. There's also the awesome option to remove a campaign, and I would not recommend this very often because this will remove all information from the campaign, and this is not something we can recover. So the only reason you would want to delete a campaign is if they've decided to not do the project at all and have no interest in doing it in the future and rather just delete it entirely. There's also an option to close a campaign before the scheduled end date. Now, you can't do this as a fundraiser or as a curator, but I can do this as a super user. So if for some reason, either as a curator or as a fundraiser, you want to end a campaign before the scheduled end date, just send me an email with all the details and I can manually close that project for you. The other thing you want to think about when managing a campaign is adding collaborators. This is a really useful function that the system has now. So fundraisers can add collaborators if, for instance, they have multiple individuals that are looking after a campaign and all of them want access to all of the reports and they also all want to receive the email notifications. For example, every time a donation is made to their campaign, they'll receive an email. To create a new collaborator, what they'll want to do is sign up for an account on power2give. And then whoever the primary fundraiser is for that organization would then add their name to the list of collaborators. And as you see, when they're signed in, they would select their name, go down to organization, which would open up the page we see here, and then they would then select collaborators. And at that point, this is where they would add in the name of the user. So once they've registered an account, you would just go in here and start typing their name and be able to save that. And they would then be able to have access to all the information for your campaign, and again, as well as link them to all the emails. This is also something to keep in mind as a curator. If you have multiple people in the office that want to manage your power2give location, and they want to have access to all of your dashboard information, your reports, and make edits, and also if they want to receive all the email notifications that you get as a curator, this is where they would be able to add them as collaborators. Keep in mind that curators can't add collaborators to their fundraiser organizations. So this has to be done if a fundraiser wants to add people to their organization and to their campaign, it has to be done by the fundraiser. If, for instance, a new hire comes in and doesn't have access to the original account, maybe they don't have access to their email and password, you can then email me and I'll be able to add the new details to the organization. So whoever the new hire is will have access to the historical campaign information. I just want to check and make sure there's no questions because I know that was a lot of information for you guys. Let me just take a look. It looks like I've got one question from Karen. And she's asking, has the preferred posting date been updated so it doesn't move? And I know, Teresa, can you speak to that? Because I'm not actually sure.
I'm actually I think I need a little bit of context for this. Are we talking about when you actually approve the campaign? If your preferred, if the date that you choose moves, or if it's the date that the fundraiser chooses? I think I need a little bit more information.
I think I remember this issue, and Karen, you can type in a little more information if you need to, but I think what was going on is that when a fundraiser was selecting a preferred posting date, it would usually auto-populate to 3 days in the future. And then depending on the day you looked at the campaign, that preferred date would move forward in time.
We are trying to make this a little bit more seamless for curators so that the date that the fundraiser chooses is more transparent at the approval process. So I think that actually does solve that problem, so that if they do choose something 3 days in advance, it will still show up as that even if you haven't approved it by that deadline. So I hope that kind of clarifies.
Thanks. I think hopefully, Karen, if you have any more questions, you can just shoot us another question. But I think we're good to go. So let's go ahead and jump right into processing payments and understanding the fees. So when a campaign closes, the first thing you're going to see as a curator is that you're going to receive an email notification similar to the one you see here. And it's just going to give like a short snapshot of all the information for that project. If you also want, you can actually pull an Excel project report. And what you do is you would navigate to My Campaigns through your drop-down menu, click the On My Page tab, scroll all the way to the bottom, and at the very bottom of that page, you're going to see a place to download a report. And this is going to be a snapshot of all the campaigns at your location. So it's going to include things that are live right now, things that are launching, things that are still in draft mode. And the nice thing is that if you look at that report and look at column G, you're going to be able to see the campaign end date for all those projects. So if maybe you're planning a vacation and you want to see what campaigns are going to be closing while you're gone, and you want to make sure that those checks go out in your absence, it's kind of nice to just get a heads up with that report. So once you've found that your campaign is closed, you're going to want to go ahead and pull a final donation report. And you would do that by going to the campaign, going into the donations button, which is right next to the edit button on the campaign. And when you scroll all the way down to the donations page, you're going to see a download report button, which will pull the Excel spreadsheet, which will have all the information for the donations for that project. And so then you'll want to use this donation report to calculate the amount of the check to the fundraiser. I've emailed most of you guys about a breakdown of how I internally calculate the fees, and I'll just go through it really quickly. The first thing I do is I look at donation, or column Q, which is donation amount. Now this is going to be the base donation amount that the donor gave, regardless if they covered fees or not. It's just going to be if they donated $10, that's the base amount, and if they had covered fees, that would be included elsewhere. So I calculated that total amount. Then I also look at matching amount. So if there's any matching for the project, I'll see how much that is. And since locally we actually collect the 12% on the total base donation amount and any matching that's received, we then calculate the 12% on that amount. I get my subtotal. Then I'll look and see if any of the donors chose to cover fees. And if they did, I would take whatever they had kind of essentially lost during the 12% fees. I would add that back in so that anything that had donations that had covered fees were no longer charged the 12%. And then I know the amount to send to the organization. So again, usually 12% is the kind of going rate for admin fees on the site, but each location is a little different. So you may not be collecting fees on the match, for instance, or maybe your percentage on the donations themselves are a little higher or a little lower. And again, the nice thing on the new site is that donors now have the option to cover the 12% admin fees for their donation, But just keep in mind that if you are collecting 12% on the match, this covered amount is only covering their donation, not any match that might be associated with their gift. And just to kind of remind you, you can find the contact and address information for the fundraiser on the Curator Dashboard by downloading the Excel spreadsheet at the bottom of the Fundraiser tab. And that's the whole system. So hopefully that was helpful for you guys. I'm going to just look and make sure there weren't any more questions before I hand it over to Teresa. Looks like Wendy's got a question. Wendy's asking, are you recommending that we move ended closed campaigns into hibernation? And I find that it's better not to hibernate campaigns because we want to have a historical archive for people to be able to see campaigns that were either successful or not successful. I know that some groups are choosing to hibernate campaigns so they don't have that running list of ending campaigns on their Curator page, and that is totally up to you as an organization what you'd like to do. We are having a fix coming up shortly, if it hasn't already come out, where any active campaigns will automatically go to the top of your page. So as soon as someone goes to your Curator page, they're going to see active projects before ended projects. So hopefully that helps answer your question, Wendy. There's another question about when the curator approves the campaign. Oh, no, that was Karen saying that we'd answered her question. And sounds like we've answered Wendy's question successfully, so that's great. All right, that's all our questions. I feel like hopefully that means I've done a good job. So Teresa, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks. And I see that I think another question just came in under the wire, so I'll go ahead and read it. It says, is there any way to access archived campaigns from the old site? And this is actually something that that Virginia and I are working on establishing right now. We're going to put an archive link onto the new site so that you can still access the sites that, or the campaigns that were live on the original site. So that is coming down the road, and you can keep an eye out for that. I'm just going to quickly go over some recent updates and some upcoming updates, as well as a brief timeline recap. I know Virginia sent this around to most of you, but we've recently changed. We've made some text edits on the website, some copy edits that reflect some typos that were there, but also some clarifications about relationships, especially as it relates to matching sponsors versus corporate matching and stuff like that. Your matching sponsor logos should now actually be links if you've included a link when you set up the matching sponsor, so that should lead to whatever website you connected to the link. The tax receipt for honoree donation should include the name of the donor instead of the name of the honoree, and donation reports include the name of the anonymous donors instead of just having it blank. I know it's blank for a little while. Donation reports include the correct number of donations for a campaign. There is some sort of glitch in there that made it so that it was totaling strangely, but now it should be the real number of donations that were made to a campaign, not including the matching amounts or the matching contributions. Project reports include all campaigns, even if they're in draft mode or hibernating. So if you download a project report, it should show you all campaigns that have ever been created for your site. And then the goal reached email is now going out to curators and to fundraisers. I know that's something you all were asking for, so we pushed that out as quickly as we could. And then for some upcoming enhancements, we're working on some more visibility for curators and matching sponsors, including moving logos to the actual campaign itself for curators, and making those the presence of the logos for matching sponsors a little bit larger. This also includes including This also includes adding some matching sponsor information to the campaign tile itself so that before somebody clicks on the tile, they can see who's matching the campaign. We're also adding functionality so that Virginia can add manual matches if necessary. We realize that your matching, the rules for matching don't necessarily always fall within that ratio, the ratio that we set up or the way it's calculating based on the ratio. So if you have, for some reason, I guess a good example is if the ratio allowed for you to match only a portion of a donation, maybe because the maximum match amount capped out or something like that with the campaign, you can actually add a match from maybe another sponsor to complete the match for that one donation. Or if you need to have, if there are any special circumstances regarding your matches, Virginia will be able to add that manual match and it'll show up in your reports and in the campaign total. I mentioned that we are sort of trying to improve the process for approving campaigns, for curators to approve campaigns, and this will include not only a better system for, a better system for choosing the start date, but also you'll be able to set an end date for your campaigns. And then lastly, I know many of you have been asking about this for a while, but we're going to be adding social media tools to the campaign pages in the near future as well. And then with that, we're sort of in transition period right now. I mean, the transition is now starting. We are still working on a draft of the agreement, and we should have the draft completed within the month or so. So you can keep an eye out for that and coming up. We are also still on track to launch in September 2016, so there have been no changes there. And with that, those are all the updates I have. I think I'll pass it back to you, Virginia.
Thanks, Teresa. Well, we've actually gotten through things. We're almost to our time limit, but we've got a little bit of time for a Q&A if you guys can stick around. If anyone had any additional questions that hadn't come up in the training, Annie, I know actually looking at the report when you signed up, you were asking about a clear understanding of the fundraiser perspective versus the curator perspective. If you want, I could just quickly show you what the curator is seeing on their side and how it differs from the curator versus a fundraiser. And then in the meantime, I'm just going to come out of our PowerPoint here. But if anyone had any more questions, you can either raise your hand or type in a question in the text box there. So Annie, if you're still interested, let me go ahead and pull up. So this is what a fundraiser would see versus a curator. So one of the big differences is if you look at the drop-down menu here, you're going to see that they don't have a dashboard option. So they're only also going to see campaigns that they're running. They're not going to have a My Campaigns page because obviously they're not a curator and they're not managing other projects not linked to their organization. So they're going to see their campaign that they've run in the past. They're going to have just their organization details that we've looked at earlier, where they're a collaborator. And that's pretty much it. The other thing is that when they type or they click into their project, once a campaign has been submitted and launched, they'll no longer be able to edit their campaign, so they'll only be able to see what the public sees for their campaign. They'll still be able to access their donations and send messages. They can also choose to hibernate or remove their campaign, but again, they won't be able to make any edits once a campaign goes live. So hopefully that helps answer that question you had. And it looks like we've got a question from Dara, and she's asking, will we retain sole autonomy over projects that happen in our region? And Teresa, I think this is probably more a question regarding the transition in 2016.
Yeah, We're still sort of working through what the permissions are going to be for curators, but as far as I'm concerned and as far as I know at this point, we are still going to give you the ability to not put campaigns on your site or on your curated page if it's not something that you want to endorse, or if it's not in your area, or if for some reason it doesn't fall within your criteria. So we're still working on that, but the idea is that, yeah, you would still be able to control that.
Thanks, Teresa. It looks like that's answered Dara's question. So if there aren't any more questions, then I think I'm going to wrap things up for you guys, unless there's anything that comes through in the next few minutes. I just want to thank you guys all. I know you're all really busy, and I appreciate you guys having the time to sit here and do our training, and hopefully you heard some things that you didn't know about on the new system, or maybe just refresh some things that you hadn't thought about in a while. So if there are any more questions, or if you had comments about the webinar today, please feel free to give me a call or email me at the information you see on your screen here. But otherwise, thank you all so much and have a great day, and I'll be in touch again soon.